I live in Springfield with my 8-year-old daughter, Mallory. Just the two of us in a modest little house I bought about a year after the divorce. It's not much, but it's ours. Slightly crooked window frames, square doors, and all. Home. The storm hit just after dinner. A thick, slow-moving summer storm. The kind Missouri likes to throw at you out of nowhere. We just finished spaghetti, Mallory's favorite, and we're settling into a round of Uno in the living room when the power cut out. She gave this over-the-top gasp, giggled, and crawled over next to me. Guess we're playing extreme mode. I joked, reaching for the drawer where we keep flashlights. I lit a couple candles and set them on the coffee table, while Mallory grabbed the sleeping bags and a pillow fort kit she got for her birthday. We made a night of it. She asked if we could camp out in the living room. I said yes without hesitation. These were the moments I lived for. We rolled out the sleeping bags, roasted marshmallows over a tea light, and played a made-up card game with rules that changed every 5 minutes. The storm rumbled outside, all heavy wind and slapping rain. But inside, it felt like one of those magical childhood midnights. Until it didn't. We just finished our third round when Mallory stopped mid-lap. She turned her head sharply toward the hallway that led to the kitchen and basement. Her eyes narrowed. "There's someone in the basement," she said, just like that. No hesitation, no drama, just a fact. I raised an eyebrow. "In your imagination?" I asked, trying to play it off. She shook her head. "No, I saw him. When I went to the kitchen to get my water bottle, he was walking down the stairs, his back to me." I froze, hand still holding my cards. "What did he look like?" "He didn't have shoes," she said softly. "He was just walking down the stairs. His head was down. I don't think he saw me." 1,000 things went through my head. Had someone broken in? Had she seen her own reflection in the sliding glass door? A shadow? A flicker of lightning against the wall? I stood, grabbed the old metal bat I keep under the couch, and told her to stay in the living room, right in the middle of the sleeping bags and light. I descend the basement stairs slowly, my flashlight beam carving through the heavy dark. The air was storm-heavy and humid, like breathing through a damp towel. The basement has always had a strange smell, a mix of old paint, earth, and moisture. But this time, there was something else, something sour. I looked around the room. The workbench, the water heater, the laundry area all looked untouched. Then I saw them, footprints, bare feet, muddy and Nevin, leading from the back basement door and ending beneath the staircase. No exit prints, no return trail, just one set walking in. I approached the stairs slowly, sunlight trembling a bit in my hand. I leaned down to look under. Nothing, just the usual mess of boxes, paint cans, and storage bins. Still, I searched the basement top to bottom, behind the furnace and the crawl space, even behind the big plastic bin stacked against the wall. Nothing. Back upstairs, Mallory was sitting cross-legged in her sleeping bag, her flashlight aimed down the hall like a security guard on duty. I smiled like everything was fine. I said maybe she just saw her reflection position, or maybe the candlelight played tricks on her. She didn't argue. She just laid down and zipped herself into the sleeping bag all the way up to her nose. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the storm had passed. I checked the yard. There were muddy disturbances in the grass leading to the basement window well. No solid footprints. But I didn't like what I saw. I headed to the hardware store after work, bought motion sensor lights and a cheap indoor-outdoor security camera system. I didn't tell Mallory I installed the cameras. One above the back door, one facing the basement steps, and one on the porch looking out into the backyard. I figured if someone had actually been in there, I'd catch them next time. The following nights were quiet. Mallory stopped mentioning the man. Things started to feel normal again. Then, on the fourth night, another storm rolled in. The wind this time was violent, like it had something to prove. The power flickered, and then went out completely just after 10 o'clock p.m. I grabbed into my flashlight, tucked Mallory in on the couch, and went to check the fuse box in the basement. More out of habit than hope. That's when I saw the mud, fresh on the top step. I descended carefully. The light from my flashlight was sharp, and it caught everything. The prints were there again, bare feet, wet, uneven, leading from the back door to under the stairs. But this time they weren't alone. Next to the prints was a towel, and on it, a line of snacks. Crackers, a juice box, one of Mallory's favorite fruit shoes, all placed neatly like an offering. I scanned every inch of that basement. I moved bins, unscrewed wall panels, even climbed halfway into the crawl space. Still nothing. I locked the basement door, triple-checked the windows, and called the police. They came quickly, probably because I sounded panicked. 2 officers did a full sweep, but found nothing. Said it could have been a squatter who found a way in during the storm. Said I should upgrade the locks. I thanked them and sat up until morning watching the camera feeds on my laptop. At 2:11 a.m., the backyard camera caught him, thin, pale, soaked to the bone. His hair stuck to his face. He stepped out of the woods and walked straight to the basement storm doors. He opened them, slipped inside. There was no footage of him leaving. I called the police again. This time, they brought more guys. They searched everything. The attic, the vents, even the garage ceiling panels. Nothing. Mallory started waking up at night, screaming. Said she saw someone standing in the hallway outside her room. Said he didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. I installed more locks, added another camera inside of the way. The next night, no footage of anything unusual. The night after, I caught it, a tall shadow, standing just outside Mallory's doorway, perfectly still for 9 minutes, then gone. No door opened, no sound, no trace. That was it. I packed our things the next morning, called a friend with a moving truck. We were out by the end of the week. I signed a lease on a 3rd-floor apartment with security cameras in the hallway and a doorman downstairs. Mallory started sleeping through the night again, but sometimes when it rains, she asked me to check the hallway, just to be sure. And I always do, because we never found out who he was, and we never found out if he ever left. The night it started, I was alone. My husband, Mark, was in Boston for a dental conference, and I was looking forward to a quiet weekend of movies, bad takeout, and catching up on laundry. I'm a dentist, too. We met in dental school, but between our practices, family, and everything else, we rarely get that stillness. I thought it would be nice, peaceful, predictable. It was the middle of January, Syracuse winter, bitter cold. They'd warned about a nor'easter earlier in the week, but when I looked out the window that Friday afternoon, it was just a steady dribble of rain. Typical upstate gloom. By 9:00 p.m., though, the dribble had turned into sheets of icy rain, and the wind was howling like something alive. I was curled up on the couch in my flannel pajamas, our golden retriever Scout snuggled next to me, fireplace crackling. I had a rear window on in the background and a bowl of popcorn I wasn't really eating. The lights flickered a few times, but the power held. I had a glass of wine on the coffee table. My phone was charging in the kitchen. It felt like the first real evening I'd had to myself in months. The first noise came around 10:30, just a dull thud. I assumed it was a branch hitting the roof or maybe snow shifting. Our gutters were old and stuff always got stuck up there. Scout's ears perked up, but he didn't bark, so I figured it wasn't a big deal. Then came another thud and another, heavier, spaced apart like footsteps. Scout growled low and long, not something he did often. I muted the movie, sat still, and listened. I remember the way the wind rattled the window panes, like something trying to get in. The sound came again. 3 thuds, moving across the roof. I stood up and walked toward the front of the house. The footsteps seemed to follow, pacing the length of the roof. Not fast, not erratic, just pacing. I told myself it was ice cracking. The wind, maybe an animal, a raccoon, even though it sounded too heavy. Scout stood in the center of the living room, eyes locked on the ceiling, tail stiff, nose twitching. I decided to call the non-emergency line for the local police. The dispatcher was calm, polite. She said she'd send someone to drive by and check. Said it was probably just the storm playing tricks. I waited with a flashlight in hand, Scout glued to my leg. About 15 minutes later, headlights flashed outside. An officer knocked on the front door and shined his light up at the roof. His boots crunched through frozen slush as he circled the house. He didn't see anything. Walked around the property, checked the yard, then said he saw no tracks, no signs of anyone. Probably the wind, he said with a sympathetic shrug. I nodded, thanked him, and closed the door, then triple locked in. I left the porch light on and closed the blinds. I stayed up another hour, but the sound didn't return. Eventually, Scout relaxed enough to fall asleep. I left all the lights on downstairs and took him with me to bed. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the attic hatch above the hallway closet was slightly ajar. Not much, maybe an inch, just enough to catch my eye. I stared at it for several seconds, toothbrush in hand, foam gathering at the corners of my mouth. We rarely go into the attic, just for holiday decoration. Really, I pulled the step stool from the laundry room and pushed the hatch fully open. A cold draft spilled out. I caught a faint whiff of something musty, like old fabric or something that had been damp too long. I grabbed a flashlight and poked my head up. Dust insulation, a plastic tub of Christmas lights, and footprints. Faint, muddy smudges across the plywood floor of the attic. They weren't there before. I would have noticed. I climbed up slowly, sweeping the beam of my flashlight side to side. The prints led across the attic floor to the window. The latch was broken. The window was cracked open, letting in slivers of icy air. I backed down quickly, locked the hatch. My hands were shaking. I called a contractor that afternoon to inspect it, told him I thought the window might be loose. Left it vague. He came the next day, checked the roof, the attic window, the frame. Looks like someone jimmied it, he said. Could have gotten in from a roof or out. There was no damage to any doors or windows. No signs of forced entry anywhere else. That attic window was the only access point. I installed motion lights the next day, ordered cameras online, and moved down to the guest bedroom with Scout. I didn't want to sleep directly beneath that hatch anymore. Mark came home 3 days later. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. He offered to call the police again, but what could they do? There was no footage, no face, just wet footprints that no one could explain. That night, the cameras were finally installed and synced to my phone. I stayed up late, nervously watching each feed on rotation. Living room, backyard, attic hatch. I even set to face the side yard, just in case. The worst part? The storm that night was so loud. Between the thunder and the wind screaming through the trees, it made it almost impossible to hear anything else. Whoever left those prints could have walked right through the house, and we wouldn't have heard a thing. For weeks, Scout would stop in that same hallway at night, stare up at the hatch and growl. I still check the attic latch every night before bed. I still keep the motion lights on. I still sleep with Scout close. Because it wasn't the footsteps that scared me most. It was knowing someone stood right above me, pacing, listening, and I never heard them. I've always loved being alone in the wilderness. That's part why I got into landscape and wildlife photography in the first place. There's nothing quite like waking up to a sky full of mist, your breath foggy in the air, and the sound of nothing but birds and the wind rustling the trees. It resets you, reminds you how small you are. And I like that. I'd done solo trips before, including in harsher terrain than Mount Rainier. So when I planned a long weekend in the park to photograph the late summer storms, I wasn't worried. I brought my tent, a weather-resistant tarp, backup gear, food, and plenty of water. The forecast said there'd be scattered storms, but I had rain gear and I knew how to stay dry. The site I picked was a primitive one. No electricity, no rangers on site, just a cleared patch of ground about 1.5 miles from the road. You had to hike in and haul your gear. I'd stayed there before. I liked how quiet it was. It was mid-afternoon when the sky started darkening. I figured I had maybe an hour to get everything set up, and I was right. There. I got the tarp pitched, the tent staked, and my gear bag off the ground just as the wind picked up. Then the rain came. Sheets of it. It hit the trees with a noise like static, drumming on the roof of my tent, soaking the forest floor instantly. I zipped myself inside, pulled out my Kindle, and settled in. There was no signal, of course, but I liked it that way. The wind made the tent shake occasionally, but I wasn't scared. I'd weathered worse. By nightfall, the rain was relentless, the kind that makes it impossible to hear anything more than a foot away. I ate a protein bar, flipped through a few chapters, and tried to ignore how the wind had taken on a howling edge. Around 8:45 p.m., just after full dark, I heard the first voice. Hello? It wasn't loud, but it was close. Outside my tent. I froze. Hello, you in the tent? I unzipped the flap about 3 inches. There was a man standing just outside the glow of my lantern, wearing a tan rain jacket with a badge stitched to the chest and a flashlight in one hand. He smiled like he was trying to put me at ease. Evening, ma'am. I'm with the Park Service. We're doing a sweep to make sure campers made it in okay before the storm. The badge looked off. Not a patch, not embroidered. Printed. His jacket and boots pristine. No mud on them. His flashlight wasn't a regulation model. I'd seen the real ones before. They use industrial-grade LED floods. This was a basic camping flashlight from any hardware store. Still, I kept my voice calm. I'm fine. Made it in before the rain. Planning to hike out tomorrow. You up here alone? He asked, squinting as if trying to look inside. Nope, I lied. My boyfriend's in the other tent. He looked behind me. There was no other tent. He went to check the trailhead. We're leaving early. The man nodded slowly. Good. These storms can bring down branches. A lot of flash floods up here. 2. We've camped here before, I said. He didn't move, didn't smile again. Well, he finally said, just making the rounds. Stay dry. Then he turned and walked into the trees. I didn't sleep. I kept the light on in the tent all night. Bear spray in my lap, hand on my knife. The storm kept coming in waves. The wind howled. Thunder shook the ground. Around 3 o'clock a.m., I started to drift off. Then I heard the zipper, the sound of fabric teeth parting. It was my tent. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Just reached slowly for the knife. There was silence, then a soft, rustling sound like someone crouching. I looked through the tiny gap in the corner of the tent wall. He was there, the same man, kneeling by the flap. His hand hovered over the zipper. He wasn't opening it. He was just holding it, watching. I shifted just slightly, enough to make the sleeping bag crinkle. He looked up sharply, then stood and backed away into the trees. But I heard him out there, off and on for the next hour. Sticks snapping, something brushing the tent wall. Every time I turned my light off, I'd hear a shuffle like he was getting closer. Every time I flicked it back on, it stopped. At one point, I called out. I called the ranger station. They're on their way. No response. But I heard the sound of wet leaves shifting. I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun. As soon as it was light enough to see, I packed my gear in 15 minutes flat and hiked out without eating. The trail was slick. Branches had fallen across in a few places. But I didn't stop. I didn't even check my GPS. I knew the route by heart. The ranger station at the entrance to the park was open. I told them what happened, showed them where I'd camped, and described a man. They looked at each other. We didn't send anyone out there last night, one of them said. No ranger has been in that area all week. I nodded, even though my stomach turned over. You said he had a badge? Printed one, sewn onto the jacket. They took a report, gave me a number to call if I remembered anything else, then told me I did the right thing by leaving. A week later, one of them called me, said another woman reported something similar. A guy in a fake ranger outfit trying to get her to let him into her camper. She screamed, he ran, left no trace. I still wonder what he wanted. What would have happened if I'd been asleep? Or if I hadn't lied about not being alone? I've camped since, but I never do it solo anymore. That badge could have been printed, but that stare, that was real. If you've ever felt watched, even for a second, you're not alone. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Be careful out there. Silence doesn't always mean safety. You lock the door, but who's watching from the other side? Click now to watch 4 very disturbing stalker horror stories. It only gets darker from here. Stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, some people don't knock. They wait. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.